Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the DJ Sessions Presents the Virtual Sessions. I'm your host Aaron, and right now I'm sitting in the virtual studios in Seattle, Washington, and coming in with me all the way from New Jersey, we have Michael, aka Textbook Maneuver. Michael, how you doing today?
Doing great, man. How you doing, Darren?
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for being here with us today. Really appreciate it. Had a little pre-show stuff going on beforehand, some last-minute important phone calls that I had to tackle and get out of the way, but I really appreciate you being here, being patient with us, and getting started today. I want to give a shout-out to any of your viewers and fans that are watching right now. Thank you very much for tuning in with us today. So, Textbook Maneuver, or we'll call you Michael throughout the interview, basically. But you just started. You're a new artist. And, first and foremost, what's the story behind your artist's name, Textbook Maneuver? Where did that come from?
Yeah, well, no, first of all, thanks for having this platform, and thanks for having me on, man. This is awesome.
Yeah.
So for the name, I became a professional musician recently, right? But I've always been into music growing up and everything. And my professional life, I'm more of a scientist, right? I went to school, did a lot of science stuff. I do science stuff at work and everything. So whenever I'm learning a new subject, I'm reading textbooks or just reading stuff, right? So when I was first getting into this, I'm like, I got to figure out how to do this. So I just, the way my brain works, I ended up reading a bunch of stuff. I took some classes at a local college, and I was like, I'm doing a textbook maneuver here. You know what I mean? So it was kind of like my typical way of learning something new. Knew piano a bit growing up. Played a little bit of bass guitar growing up, but never anything professional. Never really got that great at any of that. But just started learning and reading and taking classes, and the name worked for me, right? I knew I wanted like a two-name thing. I kind of like when artists have two names or two words in a name, I should say. So that one worked.
It is kind of hard picking names. I was kind of giving you a little bit of history before pre-show, my background. And, my first show that I started out with was Phantasmagoria. And that name actually came from an event that my dad wanted to throw one of my brother's concerts when I was a kid. And I mean, I was in my teens probably. I think it was maybe 11, 12 years old, somewhere around there maybe. And that name stuck with me for so many years that 14 years later, when I produced my first broadcast show, the name of the show was Phantasmagoria, and I don't know why that popped in my head, why I wanted to do it. But, then I had Northwest Extreme Sports, I had Image Nightlife, and then came back. And, when you're branding something, I thought to myself, oh gosh, I got to make t-shirts and logos and websites. And this is 2001, 2002, so tools weren't really readily available to do that as not like they are now. But all that branding, I said, no, we came back in 2005, we just umbrellaed it all under ITV. And then we had ITV Nightlife, ITV Music, ITV Short Films, things like that. So it made it a little easier. But yeah, picking a name that you're going to last with, that has to stand with you and resonate. And that's your persona, exactly. Your character.
Yeah. I mean, it's a mouthful. It's a pain in the ass to type maneuver every time I want to type maneuver. I'm being honest with you, but and also I want to make sure I wasn't used anywhere, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing.
You got to check. So many artist names have been taken.
That's the one thing. It's funny. I had an incident, speaking about getting names taken. I had an incident in 2018 where there was an event. We were doing an event. Somebody went online and they looked us up and they said, oh, the DJ Sessions. And they go, is this you? And it wasn't us. And so I looked and I kind of did a little bit of research into it. And there was a typo basically on this website. And I contacted the website. I contacted the artist, contacted the owner, because I figured it wasn't the artist's fault. It was the owner, whoever put the online calendar together. Right. And it wasn't met with a well reception. I was trying to be plausible, like, hey, I'm just trying to investigate, figure out what's going on. That was some, let's say, not so friendly retort comments back. And, and that forced me basically to go and trademark my brand. Yeah. And we have our national copyright going in place, and we'll be doing our international trademarks as well. Those aren't going in place. They take time to do and money, unfortunately. But it's what I tell a lot of DJs out there that starting the business. It costs $50 at the state level to trademark your name, and at least you have that. That's a start to say you had it first. If somebody uses it forward, you can always go back to that original trademark. I mean, you can put it once you put it out there, you're kind of protected as using it first. But pay the $50 and trademark your name, at least at the state level. And that lasts for 5 years. Very easy to do. You don't have to go national or international. necessarily, not yet, but at least you're starting the process. And there's other things. I have 2 business degrees, so I'm kind of savvy on starting up businesses and small
Good.
businesses and working with entrepreneurs and stuff like that. So yeah, trademark your name, check it, name check it. Good tip out there.
Absolutely.
But I love your backstory though. That's pretty awesome. Textbook maneuver. If you could describe your music in 3 words or less, how would you describe it?
That's tough. It's kind of, I'll say eclectic. All right. So it's a little bit, it's a lot of genres together. So eclectic is one word.
Okay.
Um, Textbook maneuver itself, I'd say it's definitely chill.
Okay.
And I think it's kind of cinematic because I've had a lot of people that listen to it, lots of friends and family, but even non-friends and family. And I have this one brother-in-law, and he's like, "I've had the strangest dreams listening to your music." So it's stuff like that. And then I've had other people, reviewers and stuff. They say, "Wow, this sounds like it could be used in a movie." So there is this cinematic element to it, and that's intentional, no doubt about it. Like I'm trying, I can't sing. I'm trying to learn to sing, but right now I can't sing. But I love emotional music, and usually that comes from the singer. At least for me, it comes from the singer. So I'm trying to do that through the voicings I'm using with synths and stuff. So I'm trying to make it feel emotional, sound emotional, but without any lyrics. So it ends up being kind of cinematic. But I like that kind of music. I like when the song can take you on a journey in your mind. And sometimes even when I'm composing, I come up with the song title based on what I'm feeling as I'm writing it. It's like,
It's
I end
funny
up
you
like,
bring that up because
yeah,
I'm.
yeah.
It sounds like your genre of music. I haven't had a chance to listen to your whole all your music yet, but definitely sounds like it's right in line with the type of style of music. If I were to produce, would be just that cinematic, earthal, pan synth type stuff that was very affluent in the 80s. It's why I love Stranger Things and the soundtrack to that, or
Yeah.
when John Carpenter soundtracks.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
That kind
like
of stuff is awesome. Yeah.
what I like really, 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 really like. Um, that kind of stuff there because it's just kind of what I grew up listening to in the 80s. And when my brothers had a studio that's kind of playing with the synthesizers and the rack mounts and all that, it's kind of what I liked. And I listened to a lot of down tempo ambient, what could be definitely background noise, movie soundtrack stuff already through Soma FM. I always give them a shout out when I can. The Groove Salad Station by Soma FM. It's
I'll
like,
check
if
it out.
anyone
I don't
knows
know
me
that
really
one.
well, it's like, what's going to be on Darren's tombstone? Soma FM, a solar panel playing Soma FM 24/7.
It's actually a
So
good
you
idea for
come to me,
tombstones.
you're going to know that's what I'm grooving to when I'm
There you
in
go,
the
man.
beyond you know. But no, that being said, it's definitely sounds like we definitely have that same taste in there. Now
Yeah.
you just launched an EP, Strike Joy, back in 2024, December 2024, not too long
Yeah.
ago. And what was that like building up to put together your first EP?
Yeah, it was wild. And I had just started learning how to use one of the DAWs. I was using Logic. And I was working with the loops that are in there. I don't know, you might not be familiar with that, but there's loops in there that are, royalty free you can play around with. And I was doing it in the evenings in my sunroom. So all the crickets and the frogs are out there. And, I'm telling you, the stuff ended up getting into my brain because one of the songs that's promoting now, Nocturnal Musings, it sounds like, night creatures with some really crazy EDM drumming and stuff mixed in. So I did that one, and it wasn't. I have a musical background, meaning I took piano lessons. I understand music composition and melodies and harmony and how to put structures together. So I was definitely tapping into that as well. So it came out pretty good. I was like, wow, this is all right. And then I did 2 more, and I'm like, all right, screw this. I'm putting this out. you
Nice.
know, and I was always a fan of, and 2 things. I've always been a fan of EPs. Some of my favorite bands. Sometimes their best songs are on the EP rather than their full length, right? And that's
Uh-huh.
usually when it's hidden gems. These songs all sounded similar because of the methods I was using, so they fit together nicely. And then I was also composing some of my longer form, the cinematic stuff, and it sounded enough like Textbook Maneuver to me, but it was different. So I said, all right, I got to keep these 3 separate. They're also my origin, the first ones I did. So that's why it came together that way. And I always felt, I work in a corporate world type situation, so we always have mission statements, and it's kind of good to come up with a brand, as you were saying. Come up, what is your statement? So I always said, if I put out music, I want it to kind of make the world happier with my music, right? I'm not going to put out black metal that's going to, scare the crap out of people, but I like black metal, so I'm not against black metal. But it's like, all right, I want to put out music that's going to make people happy, make people chill, because you have to pick a genre, right, or not. We could talk about that later, but. I said, all right, well, people try to strike gold. People try to strike this. I said, I'm going to just try to strike joy, with music. Can I strike joy with music? So I came up with that title for the EP.
Nice.
And I just put those 3 songs together. They're kind of really short form, fun tunes, and definitely separate from the longer form album that I put out.
A lot of people, the art of doing EPs or full length albums is not. It's not necessarily customary in this day and age. So everyone's looking for that single and the single and the single and the single and the single. And it's just like, like we were talking pre-show, about how back in 2017, 18, my marketing teacher was saying there's 1 million videos a minute being uploaded to YouTube. A million videos a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 60 million videos an hour. And they're like,
it's even more than that now. It's insane.
More than that now. And you think of music creation and everything, how much stuff is being just thrown out there now that there's not really a gateway because you can create your own label and say, here I am, and put it up to here. And that whole game has changed now, especially when I talk with a lot of label owners, because, at one point we were toying around with launching our own label here at the DJ Sessions, even having our own music store. Our site is built for it. And I kind of shied away from that because I don't have time to be an A&R person and listen to hundreds and hundreds of tracks and decide what I want to put in, what I don't, what sound we want to be known for, all that fun stuff. We are launching a new music section, which we're looking to incorporate music from people in there, and a new radio player for us as well. So that'll be nice. We can feature music, and we are syndicating other shows and things of that nature. Cool. But I mean, that's a whole full-time job in itself,
Yeah.
And then there, I wouldn't have the bandwidth for it.
So it's a double-edged sword because I call it frictionless. You can start a label if you learn how to do it right. That's why I took the music business class, so I could learn how to do it. Yeah. Once you learn how to do it, you trademark everything. You make sure everything has its codes and metadata. You can do it. But so it's a double-edged sword because everybody can. It does take time and effort. You got to do it right. But then it also means a lot of people are doing it, and it's really how do you if it's an ocean of music, and maybe your song is less than a single drop of water, probably at 1/10 of a single drop of water.
Yeah,
and it's going to land in this ocean. How do you know it's going to make a splash?
Exactly. And then obviously money is a big factor that can come into play and help out in certain areas. To do that. But it's awesome to see you're taking on that challenge and coming out first, hitting it hard with an EP. And then following up with that, just earlier this summer, you released Adrenaline Slip. The name behind, so you strike joy and now you have an adrenaline slip. Is this like a racing album, or what's the sign behind that? Like, am I going to see it Fast and the Furious and put it in my car? And
there's a story to this one too, for sure. Well, first of all, the songs when I was composing them got long and longer and longer. And if I think about my music origins, I always had music playing in my house. My parents' alarm system was the radio's always on. If somebody breaks in, they're going to hear the radio, think we're here. I'm not kidding. My mother used to literally do that. She would leave the radio on all the time. But that being said, they had like Beatles records, great vinyl collection, right? Beatles, Jim Croce, Fleetwood Mac, all this stuff from, that people's parents of my age listened to. But good stuff, right? It wasn't crap. And then my brother and his friends, they got into more of the classic rock, prog rock. And that's when songs started to get really long. So that was seeping into my subconscious from my brother's influence there, and then I got into more of the heavier side of that, and then definitely got into more metal and punk and all of that. But the reason I'm bringing this up now is I think I've never forgotten that origin stuff. And I'm still drawn to the complex music of the '70s when the songs were long, they were trippy, a lot of synthesizers, right? Phenomenal drumming, great lyrics. Great vocals. So when I was composing, I didn't care if the songs were long. even though I knew Spotify and all this other stuff that's out there now do care, but I didn't care, and I still don't care, right? So I said I'm going to put out music that I really enjoy, and for me, it's going to be me. If I like it, I'll put it out. If I don't like it, I'm not putting it out. I'll just, and so I have like a whole library of stuff that's not going out because it's more just, you have to write a lot of crappy songs to write one good song. It's sort of what you learn pretty quickly.
You almost just answered one of the questions I was going to ask you, and I love it when
Yeah.
people do that on my show. And I don't know because I didn't send questions out earlier, but yeah, we'll touch on that in a moment. But thank you for bringing that up. But yeah,
Yeah. So the
saying,
songs got really long, right? And then, so I said, you know what? I'm going to put out a full length, right? I said I'm going to pull out a full length, and I'm like, this is going to be a debut. And I don't know if this is going to go anywhere, but maybe in 30 years, this becomes my debut, right? And I don't think I'm going to ever be a famous musician or anything. But I'm a history buff, so I know sometimes finding legacy things, even things that get found that people had never heard of. Like this guy Nick Drake has this huge renaissance the past probably 15 years, but a lot of people forgot about him for about 20 years. So what if there's a moment like that? So then I literally started saying to myself, well, what are some of my favorite debut albums of all time from artists that I still like, whether it's electronic music or prog or whatever. So two of my favorite bands, their debuts are still my favorite album by them. So one's called Adrenaline and one's called Slip. So I said that phrase actually goes well together. So that's how I ended up calling my album Adrenaline Slip in honor of these two artists that I love, and that's their debuts that I listen to in full every year, from start to end. Every year, at least once, I listen to those two albums. And that music sounds nothing at all. One band is the Deftones. I don't know if you know the Deftones, but they're pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
Adrenaline Slip sounds nothing like the Deftones, and the other ones is more of a smaller band from the New York area called Quicksand, and they're more like a post-hardcore band. Again, sounds not very emotional, but sounds nothing like Adrenaline Slip. So that's how I came up with the name Adrenaline Slip, and it ended up being like 73 minutes in total. It's a long album. I probably would have made it longer, but I was reading, I read a lot, that's my textbook maneuver. So I think it was Rick Rubin's book. And his book's kind of interesting. It's mostly like advice and sayings, almost like poetry in certain spots. But he has this one thing that he put in there. It said something like, you need to stop working on a project so you can start working on your next project. So that's how kind of I just, because when you're doing this, especially with the what I'm realizing how you can put music together, you can literally work on a song forever. There's always, you'll wake up in the middle of the night going, oh, did I get that pan exactly right? Or should I use a different synth on that part? Or is the bass drum coming in too quickly? Am I using the right snare? Yeah, at some point you have to stop.
Yeah.
So, but it's a long album. I think it's worth the listen. One of the songs is actually a 4-part suite, which is kind of cool. So again, it goes back to my prog thing, but there's a lot of synths, especially like the 80s stuff, like Gary Newman and all that stuff. I love that stuff too. So that's why when you said give me 3 words to describe your music, it's tough. And it could be dangerous because in this day and age, if you don't fit in one genre, it's very hard to market yourself to.
Yeah.
So right now I'm considering myself an electronic musician. But I think people from different styles could probably get into this album.
Nice. And did you mentioned you just kind of got into this recently? Do you have a musical background other than your family listening to, like you mentioned, Fleetwood Mac and the stuff I grew up with my dad was listening to, even though he's turning 89 this year, he still was young at heart and listened to a lot of stuff from the 70s that I grew up with. I think of the classics that are great. I mean,
the sound is perfect on some of them.
Yeah. But other than that, were they musicians or into music other than listeners?
No, my father recently told me that my grandfather was a good singer, but I never knew my grandfather. He died before I was born. So there's really, so here's the story on how I got into music, besides listening to music. So I have friends that owned the carpet business in the Bronx. And part of that business was I think it's the main distributors of the carpet. They used to give out pianos as a thank you to the owners of the carpet businesses. So this family is like one of the most generous families I've ever met. They gave my family a piano, and I wouldn't. I'm getting a little bit. It's a kind of emotional for me, but I would not be making music. if I didn't have that piano. I think. I don't know. But that's my origin. So my parents are generous. They said, he's taken to it. He's improvising. He's doing all this crazy stuff on the piano. So my mother, my sister, and I took lessons. And I'm the only one that stuck with it. My sister hated it. She quit right away. My
Well,
mother stuck with me for a while, so she started playing a little bit. But I basically never stopped. So I took lessons, and that's when I got into classical music. And I learned about music theory. And I would listen to classical. I still listen to classical, but things like Satie is what I really liked, which is sort of almost like stuff you'd hear at a spa. But I mean, some of the melodies that Satie comes up with, incredible.
yeah,
And Ravel's another one, but I also like Beethoven. To me, he's like the heavy metal guy of classical. And then
definitely.
Mozart's like the pop star, right? Everybody
Yeah,
knows Mozart. So
definitely.
I just did that for a long time, and then when I was getting to high school, I had other priorities, including like metal and punk and stuff. I'm like, I don't want to play the piano anymore. I want to rock out now, right? So that's when I started learning bass. So I kind of gave up on piano. But then when I moved out of my parents' house and moved to New Jersey, I grew up in the Bronx. So when I moved out to New Jersey, I brought my parents like, take the piano. You're the only one that uses it. So they let me, that piano from the O'Connor family, I was able to bring with me to Jersey. It's still alive. I gave it to my niece because I upgraded. I bought myself a new piano, but my niece still has the original O'Connor piano. Oh, I call it the O'Connor piano. And she still plays it, which is cool. But anyway, long story short, when I was a bachelor living out in New Jersey when I first moved out here, and I found a local. I said, I'm going to start playing piano more. So I found a lady who was originally from Russia, and her husband was a pretty well-known opera singer in Russia, and then they moved to the U.S. So I ended up taking lessons with her, and she was really like almost like hitting my hand with a bamboo stick. So she got me really disciplined, and I really started working on my scales and my chord progressions, and so that was in my 20s. I probably spent, I think, probably about 3 or 4 years with her. And she would bring me to recitals, and it was a weird scene because I'd be in the front row, and I was, an adult, right? And it's like all like little kids, and I'm sitting in the front row with my sheet music, getting ready to go on stage, and I get massive stage fright. So even to this day, I get really nervous playing live. So yeah, so it's kind of good to be a bedroom studio musician nowadays too, if you have stage fright. But eventually, I'll
Well,
make it out onto the
I think
stage.
I think that kind of answers
That's my
my
musical background. So I
yeah.
always wanted to learn the theory,
But that definitely, I think, would scream a big yes. You do come from a music family background. That's
I
awesome.
guess I do.
And I'm glad you really, again, you did it again. And I really love it when people do this on the show. You don't know the questions that are coming up, not what's
I have
coming up
no idea
next.
what
But
you're
you
gonna
led
ask.
right into my next question because I liked it when you were talking about the teacher who would
Yeah,
almost hit you with the little bamboo reed. As I'm going to say, the question is how much of a perfectionist are you? And I think that just rings in why it comes into play because you were trained
yeah,
to be that, to do that way and think that way to hit it. And sometimes, like you said earlier in the conversation, that can be it can be hard to put something down because there's always something you can do as being a
yeah,
perfectionist. I know this if you're into astrology in any way, shape, or form, I'm a Virgo. Most people think I'm a Leo because I'm on the cusp, but I'm a Leo Virgo, and I'm like, that has to look this way, and and that's there we go, you know. And how to know when to take a break and step away from something. Like you said, start a new project. I like that quote you mentioned from Rick Rubin, a very,
yeah.
very awesome producer, good, wise producer who obviously is very successful.
Yeah.
And
I'll throw another because this is really
yeah,
important too. When I was starting out, and it's not that long ago, but and I don't know Jeff Tweedy at all. I don't even know that. I can't remember which band he's from, but it's one of the indie pop bands or indie rock bands. People listening are probably be like, "How could you not know who Jeff Tweedy's from?" But anyway, Jeff Tweedy wrote this book, a really short book called "How to Write One Song." So I was like, "I'm buying it." So I got that book, and that book, if anybody is listening who's starting out, that book also helps you get disciplined. And there's like little exercises you do each day. And it's actually a really good book because he talks, but it's short. It's like 100, maybe 150 pages,
mm-hmm.
but really good. Even you become a person that starts to study words more, like how do you come up with a textbook maneuver or adrenaline slip or song titles. So there's some techniques that I read in that book. But literally he said this, he's the one that kept writing. He's like, there's so many, you have to be willing to write a crappy song. You have to be willing not to be a perfectionist, and you should be able to work on something every day. And even there's one quote in there where he's like, look, you don't think you can do something in 5 minutes? Next time you don't think you do, go sit at your instrument for 5 minutes and see what you do. without any plan and just sit there for 5 minutes. And I've actually written some songs that were based off of those 5 minute moments.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot of, I think reading, I know we say reading is fundamental, but I think there is something to reading some of these folks that have lived it and gone through it, and now they're dropping gems, in some of these books.
Definitely. Jeff Tweedy's with a band called Wilco.
Oh, Wilco, that's right. See,
That's
I
the name
should
of
have
the
known
band.
that.
Is beauty of the internet and pulling stuff up while we're watching. I don't have
Yeah,
anything AI reading this and farming out questions. That would be a really cool concept, though. I'd love to pump my interviews through AI and have stuff pop up as people are talking about it, and like over here, or have a research assistant. Maybe they're listening and popping up stuff for talk. But nope, it's
yeah,
just me. I had to go up and look that up because it sounded familiar, but wasn't sure who that was as
yeah,
well. But yeah, I mean, definitely, I think reading is key. Education is a key. You can never stop getting enough
yeah,
education. I'm always constantly learning more and more stuff. I sometimes when I stopped a few months ago to take a look at like everything that I do with my brand, with my show, with my series, and I was like, wow, I have like 14 different people that I talk to do different things, but I'm the center point of it all. So I know enough to be dangerous. But when I get out of that realm, I hire somebody,
yeah,
because I
yeah,
don't need to know everything because there's somebody else out there that's an expert in that thing. And I can go, hey, I got this far, but even if it was like an attorney, I've had some things where I've had legal matters and I've gone to attorneys and like, Darren, with all the work you've done, you would have burned through you burned through the $5,000 retainer you would have given me.
yeah.
I'm like, oh, really? I just did $5,000 of the legal work. Yeah, and probably knowing what you're going down, you're probably going to do another 10 to 15,000. You can handle it because you've already got this far. You're going to be able to handle all this. I'm like, really? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, all right, cool. I learned something new. Like my dad always said, the difference between him and the mechanic is the mechanic just knows how to do it faster. The mechanic read the book. Mechanic goes in to do it, but he does it 200 times. He can do it a little
Yeah,
faster. It might take me a
yeah.
little longer, but guess what? I learned something along the way. And now next time I do it, it's like I can get in there and do it. You build that competency and confidence to do something, which then says I can do this and I can do this. You accomplish, and you get through it. And you look back. I remember the first paper I ever wrote in college. I thought I was amazingly awesome because I got an A on my first paper in English 100. I wasn't even a college level class, and I said, "See, this college stuff is easy. I know what I'm doing." I
Yeah.
think the teacher gave me an A because I turned something in. you know, and 2 years later, I'm writing 20-page thesis, and like I can have a rough draft, like ready to go. Here you go, and ready to go with those, and felt, oh, this writing stuff. This is what it's all about. But I look back at that original paper and went, oh, I didn't know anything. This is great
Yeah, you got
attempt.
to keep
A for
learning.
effort. That's what I got. I got
Yeah,
the A for effort, not
yeah,
the A for her writing. But yeah, but are you mentioned how obviously starting with analog gear, starting with the piano, but now
yeah.
moving into software production. Are you more hardware, software, mix of both?
The
You said
stuff
you
on the albums it's all software, but the
okay.
origins are all analog. I haven't set up my home studio enough where I have enough microphones, but it's off camera, but my Yamaha piano's right over there. So I usually improvise on the piano for a while. I write down the notes on sheet music, and then I'll bring it over to the laptop and then read. This is a MIDI player behind me, so I'll just redo it there. What I did on the piano. So yeah, right now it's all software based. I do have an acoustic guitar and I still have my electric guitar, so I am planning on miking up a bit more. But again, I have to read a couple of textbooks about how to do that first. So,
Yeah.
but I'll be doing that as well soon. So that'll be future projects. Will be a lot more analog.
And you mentioned using Logic earlier on. You're
Yeah.
still using Logic to this day?
Yeah, that's the one I learned on. I never tried anyone. It's the only one I ever learned. When I went to the local college, that's what they recommended trying out, and it
Yeah.
works great.
Oh, I love Logic. I used to work for
Yeah.
Apple for years. I was one of my
Okay.
jobs was a trainer for Apple to train people
Yeah.
how to use the Final Cut software and
Yeah.
Logic. Train, not make. Didn't teach how people how to make movies or how to make music, just how to use the
Yeah.
software and get around and navigate through it. But I always loved the sequencer in the back end. That's kind of how I got first introduced to making music on a computer, was using Fruity Loops.
Oh yeah,
3,
sure. Yeah.
Fruity Loops 3, and basically, that was kind of fun just playing with that. And then later on in college, I bought two pieces of Roland gear, MC505 and an SP808, and MIDI sync
Okay.
those two together, and would sit
Yeah.
there at my friend's house with the sequencer on one side and the sampler on the other, and kind of
Yeah.
make tracks, and make some fun stuff. And it was really two pieces of cool little gear that, at the time was, I think each one of those together probably cost me about 2,500, $3,000, and this is 25
Yeah.
years ago
Yeah.
for
No,
hardware
exactly.
gear.
Yeah.
But I liked because you could manipulate it all in real time. But then when I saw what Logic had on the back end, I was like, this is dope. Plus, it comes with that awesome royalty free library. And some of the secrets they've said, that some of the acoustics and how they did sound design is
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of
And
the
there's a
amount.
whole software universe of like
Yeah.
all the companies that have formed for inserts into that software.
Yeah.
So that's still like it's almost like the tree, and then all the stuff you can add to that tree from other companies, and then you can really make unique sounds. And
Yeah.
that's the secret sauce, I think, is how you manipulate. And then it's sort of it to me it's becoming an instrument, right? I'm not an anti-analog person. I'm not an anti-software person, because to me, just like singing, like your voice is an instrument. How you tune that software, or what plugins, what combinations you do, that gives you a unique sound. And I
Mhm.
track all of that too. I have a notebook because it gets so complex. So I like for each track and all of my each part of my song. Sometimes they're 30 tracks long, and there could be a few plugins on each track. I have that all notebooked. So I could, and then I am an old school type of. I love the music, like where like Fleetwood Mac has a certain sound with their bass guitar, or the Who, the way Keith Moon drummed was you could hear it, a Who song, when you hear like Keith Moon drumming, because it's Keith Moon, at least before he passed away. Um, so I like some of these unique sounds. I'm like, wait, that's my instrument. I'm going to use that in other songs. And then so when you listen to the album Adrenaline Slip, there are certain sounds that get played throughout the whole album. And I have one song, the opening track. Pretty much every chord progression you hear throughout the album is in that track somewhere. So if somebody really becomes like a audiophile and really wants to study the music, they'll see that my first song, called Birds, there's elements of every other song on the album in that song, Birds.
Yeah.
Sometimes it might be a sound I made, but sometimes it's a chord progression. Sometimes it's sped up faster than in the song, where that chord progression is the entire song. So everything I've done on an album was very strategic and intentional, but all of it was also based on improvisation. So it's kind of this weird
Nice.
economy. It's yeah.
I
I'm
recently
happy.
had a couple things
Yeah.
pop up on my timeline, social timelines here recently, and one of them I thought was so interesting. I had to watch it. A guy goes in and he literally dissects the Bee Gees "Staying Alive," and he takes it down. You know, you say you got 30 tracks. He takes it down bit by bit and isolates each one and goes,
Yeah.
"This is what it originally sounded like.
Yeah.
This is what it sounded like once they did this. This is what they sounded like when they put it together, and how it all, and the layers behind that whole song was
Yeah.
like, whoa." Like, and this is in the 70s.
Yeah.
Like, they
That's
were
when they
layering.
were literally cutting tape with a. Back then, you would
Yes,
use like a razor blade and,
exactly.
and tape stuff
And
together. Yeah.
it was just like, holy hey, I won't swear on the show because
Yeah. No, I hear
we can
you.
get syndicated and we can't have swear words from
Yeah.
SEC. But I was just blown away how the guy just dove down and it went, put it all together, and goes, and here's what you get when you put all of this together. Because
Yeah.
each sound. I was. So I
Yeah. It's
like when
wild.
those series and that pops up and looking at
Oh, exactly.
what it takes, and
Yeah, and
even
even
just
like pop, like I'm not a huge fan of like the very pop music, but when a song becomes a major hit, right? Even if it's probably been orchestrated by a studio, and there's hired songwriters for that pop star. One of the professors I had that said, you might not like that song. It might taste like candy that's going to run out your teeth from a musical point, but do that teardown. You're going to understand that song is very complex, sounds simple, but if you try to reverse engineer it and do a cover of it, there's usually some really cool stuff behind it. So sometimes I do that just to kind of learn different techniques. But yeah, I can't listen to it on a day-to-day basis, but I can appreciate the effort that goes behind it. And then there's of course a ton of money in marketing behind it as well. But
Now,
it's interesting because doing this has also opened up my appreciation of styles of music that I never really appreciated. So it's just been a really good experience the past year.
and speaking of styles and music that you never would have gotten into or maybe thought of technically listening to, do you sometimes make music completely out of your own genre that never gets released? I mean, you mentioned making the, I won't say the crap, just the stuff that maybe never sees the light of day, the vault.
Yeah,
Maybe it
yeah,
will see the light of day one day, but do you ever experiment in other genres? I know you mentioned a pre-show you have two aliases that you do release.
yeah. I have yeah. So there's another alias called Distance Major. And that one I had to change the name because I can't remember the original name, but the original name was a different artist. So actually, I have it in a notebook, but I cannot remember fully the Distance Major origin story. But that one, it's all software based, similar, but to me, it's slightly more rock, but probably closer to like a prog rock or almost like a light chill rock. I'm not going to say it sounds like Steely Dan because I mean, the musicians on Steely Dan album, there's no way I sound like Steely Dan, but it's that chill vibe, maybe it's on at a tiki bar, it's okay, that style. So I don't know if that's rock or I don't know what that is, but that's Distance Major, right? It's not Textbook Maneuver, it's not fully cinematic like Textbook Maneuver, and it's not proggy like Textbook Maneuver. And then I have another one where I'm like, you know what, dance music is fun to make. It is fun just messing with the BPMs and crazy synthesizers and just getting your freak flag on. Just so that I put under something called SciTech, and that's all caps. There's not a lot of vowels, so it looks like almost like an EDM type artist name. So I'll have an album coming out from them this year as well. And then since I do like classical music and I love the piano, I will have an album. I'm actually going to put it out under my own name, my full name. But I do like electronic music now too. So what I'm planning on doing with that one, I'm going to put out. It's probably going to be either 5 or 6 songs. So that you're going to hear acoustic piano with maybe some violin and some other classical elements, and then those same exact songs again, but with a lot more electronic elements layered on top. So you'll have 2 versions of each of those songs on the album. So that I should have done by December. I have about 5 songs finished already on the classical side, but I haven't manipulated them into a electronic layer yet. So that's pretty cool. So to me, that's a little bit outside. I never thought I'd put out classical music. And then just because I'm trying to learn, I'm learning like sort of what you said with the Bee Gees. I'm just trying to learn how other genres work. So I like old school country music like Johnny Cash. And then when those artists started putting drums, some of the drum beats that those and I don't know the drummers' names. I'm still doing my research there, but there's some drum beats that they're doing that I'm like, it's almost like jazz, but it's with a country acoustic guitar. So those I'm trying to learn because maybe they'll inspire me in how maybe I make some beats. Yeah.
You sound like you have a lot of influences that have guided your way. But when it comes to electronic music, which sounds kind of a new venture for you, new area for you, who's been your biggest influence when it comes to your career in that branch of what you're doing in your creative branch? Is there somebody that's like stands out really to you that, in electronic music that would be, I really heard this, saw this, like what they're doing and went beeline for something?
Yeah, it's I would say the first pure electronic music artist that I got into was Gary Newman. He had that song Cars, which was used hit, but he puts out so many albums. His music is pretty simple. His early stuff is much simpler. He always played with a real drummer. That's the one thing that he always did. He always had a real drummer. I think he's kept the same drummer for many years too. So he's definitely one. Growing up in the 80s, you could not get away from things like Depeche Mode and all of that stuff. So I didn't really buy that music at all, but it was on, like, I go out, my buddies go out to, I guess there were bars more than clubs, but you know what I mean? You go out and that's the music that's playing. So that you end up getting into, and like we go see cover bands and they would be playing, all of that 80s synth pop, whatever you call that. And some of that stuff is pretty good. And actually, I definitely appreciate that stuff more now, a lot more than I did when it first came out. I'm like, I can't listen to this. I'm a metalhead. But but that's definitely an influence. And then I'm telling you, that prog rock from the 70s, that's not considered electronic music, but those synthesizers, those players, the guy in Genesis, Tony Banks, incredible. Rush, I mean, Geddy Lee's the bass player, but he was also the synth player. And then even when Van Halen put out that song Jump, without the synthesizers, that would not have been what it, I mean, that's the hook right there. So I think that, for me personally, was I always loved synthesizers. And then being a pianist growing up, it was very easy to move right to a synthesizer. I'm like, wow, I can't do this on the piano. So that's, but then if we go more to the modern era, I got into some indie rock in the 90s. So Death Cab for Cutie's a band. They don't do anything electronic, but the lead singer did a project called the Postal Service with a pure electronic musician. Goes under the name, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's DNTEL. I don't know. I actually don't know how. I've never tried to pronounce that, but it's DNTEL. So Benjamin Gibbard and DNTEL, DE&T, he was just writing purely, like, really like avant-garde electric sounds. Like when you listen to his stuff, it's really, sometimes you don't even know what a melody is. It's very glitchy, really cool stuff. I love it. So him and Ben, he started literally mailing, this was back in the day, but it wasn't that long ago. It was like 1998, 99 when they worked on it. He would mail samples to Benjamin Gibbard through the mail. And then Benjamin Gibbard would get these tapes, and he would try to sing over them, add a little bit of acoustic guitar, literally mail them back. And that's how they collaborated, and that's why they called it the Postal Service, because it all was done through the mail. You know, whereas now you would just put it up on a file share drive, right?
Gosh, I hope they were backing things up before they sent them out.
Yeah, so they put out this album in 2000 called "Give Up." It is awesome. It's synth pop. It's got really good emotions on it. They have a couple of guest singers. There's a female singer who sings on a couple of songs. Really, really incredible album. That definitely said to me, wow, there's some really good modern electronic music that I would like it. So I was never really full into the electronic dance music. That's the part like when you go clubbing to a rave, and I just, I can't speak to that because I really don't know that world at all. But after the Postal Service, I started listening to other artists. So there was one called Uncle, that's from the UK. They're also a collaborative effort. Really, really cool stuff. And they have a ton of remix albums. So I started listening to their remix albums. And then I started, within like the past year, as I've been doing what I'm doing, and people have heard my stuff, they're like, you sound like Aphex Twin. So I'm like, all right, let me listen to Aphex. I'm like, wow, Aphex Twin is pretty freaking cool. I never really listened to them before, but they're awesome. And then there's another band called Boards of Canada, which is from the UK. Phenomenal. I had never heard of them. I thought I knew a lot of stuff out there. Boards of Canada. So if you
they're
like
one of my
Canada,
top. They're one of my definite top. Definite top. You'd probably love Groove Salad by Som FM. Then check them out.
Yeah,
they have the old classic Groove Salad because they're celebrating 25 years. I just heard one of the first newer they don't do commercials. They're commercial free, but they always have little. Hey, we need some money to keep our stuff running. But they're doing a 25-year anniversary. But they have classic Groove Salad, a station from like 2000 to 2013 or something like that, and then 13 forward for the last 12 some odd years. I just listen to the latest stuff, but there's some good stuff in there that I just can't get away from it. Like I said, anyone that knows me, if you're into the Boards of Canada, definitely a staple that plays a lot. Massive Attack's in there a lot.
Okay, yeah. I like Portishead. I got into. I like that actually when they first came out.
Thievery Corporation.
That's how I found out about Massive Attack. Yeah, I did like them. Yeah.
07, tons of stuff's in
07, I love. Yep, that's another one.
So you're gonna look. I'm glad I tuned somebody on to Groove Salad. So
absolutely.
When you mentioned Gary Newman with Cars, though, what sprung in my head is there was a disc that I owned. I might still have it somewhere in my closet. I moved a couple times and I got rid of stuff, but I had this disc, and I think it was the 20 most at the time when I bought it, it was the 20 most recognized electronic music songs of all time. And I think Gary Newman Cars was in there. Electro Set, How Does It Feel was in there. But one that was I think this the first track on there was the Donna Summers.
I know what you're talking about.
What's the name? Come on, Darren.
Is it Love? It's something like that. It's
yeah.
And it goes on. There's a long version that goes on for like 8 seconds. Yeah, I know exactly. That drum beat
I
has been
feel
used over
love,
and
I
over
feel
again. Yeah,
love, I feel love,
yeah, I feel
I
love. I feel love. Yeah,
feel
yeah, yeah. That's the one.
love,
Yeah,
I feel love. Oh my God, I'm getting shivers just singing it right
yeah.
now.
No, that's a good
That one was
song.
such a killer song. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
so awesome. Just
It
as
was a big
and
Studio 54.
yeah,
You can imagine people being on whatever they're on,
whatever
dancing
they're
till
on,
4 in the
whatever they were
morning. But
getting
that song
back
going
then,
for like
and
4
whatever
hours.
it's not what it is now. But just I remember that, and just this that was a really the history of electronic music, kind of
Yeah,
up until that moment. They had as far as they could. And electronic music, when I bought that, it was still coming out as a popular genre. It wasn't as big as it is now.
yeah. Now it's huge.
As you
Yeah,
know, I saw the lineup for Coachella this year, and even they're saying now electronic music is outweighing rock music for
yep,
all the festivals that are going on now. Coachella's staged, huge, like 30 something percent electronic music with like
yep. That's wild, right?
27% or something rock music and all that fun stuff. That's just the trend. That's the way it's going,
Yeah,
and
yep.
it's world phenomenon now with electronic music. So awesome stuff there. Do you listen to any podcast or live streams? And if
Yeah, I do.
so,
I listen.
what
Yeah,
are your
some
top
East
ones you
Coast
listen
ones.
to?
Yeah, they're not. It's not electronic music stuff. There's a guy out of New York. His last name's Stone. He does what's called the New York Hardcore Chronicles. Because I'm also a DIY guy. Like I grew up in the era when like punk bands would just form, and some of those kids actually lived on the street. Like they literally were like homeless, and they would borrow each other's guitars and put out albums. And that became what's known as New York hardcore, which is still exists as a genre or a subgenre. So this guy Stone, he does the New York Hardcore Chronicles, and similar, very similar long form to this, to what you do. Interviews a lot of times like some legendary guys, and he has a live chat feed. So that's I recommend New York Hardcore Chronicles because he doesn't play the music itself, but you get to hear about that whole DIY,
Hmm.
like blue collar. I can do this. I don't need a big record label. I could do it myself. So
Yeah.
for anyone who's like, should I do this myself? The way that the New York hardcore crews used to do this in the 80s is a blueprint for how you can still do it nowadays.
Yeah.
That's a good one. And then there's another one I like called Sea of Tranquility. That's on YouTube. They also it's an old webzine that now is a YouTube channel. And they get into everything from jazz fusion, which is some cool stuff because I never really used to. Jazz is something else I've gotten into more recently, but jazz fusion, I'm still trying to figure it out because sometimes it's a little too avant-garde. Sometimes I'm like, it sounds like all the instruments would just throw down a staircase. I want to see some sort of clue, but I'm trying. I'm trying to get. But they also talk about prog rock. They talk about metal. They talk about modern rock, classic rock. They have a few shows that are on regular, like every Monday night or Wednesday night, and really cool characters that he has on there. Like he has the same people that are basically his friends. But he'll even have like he's friends with the drummer from Dream Theater. So he'll show up on that show once in a while, and he'll just like the Dream Theater drummer will be on the show reviewing some music he heard recently that he likes, and you're like, wow, this guy's like in a major prog metal band called Dream Theater that sells out Madison Square Garden, but he's on this little podcast called Sea of Tranquility as well. So that's I recommend that one as well.
Nice.
But those are probably the two main ones. And I like watching, like I don't know how much YouTube stuff you watch, but like when Amoeba does What's in My Bag, that's cool because that's that sometimes. And what I'll do is I'll watch that, especially like I watched the Gary Newman one because I'm like, what is he like? Or if some electronic musicians on there, it'll be a way for me to get exposure to some new artists I've never heard before. And then also I'd like to watch when there's hip hop artists on there
Hmm.
because hip hop artists, especially rappers and like the old school rappers, they listen to so much music because that's where they get their samples from and stuff. And you find some really cool gems that I've never heard of
Yep.
from that. So I know that's probably a really popular one. What's in My Bag from Amoeba, and that's a really famous record store as well. But
Yep.
that's short, right? They're usually about 10 minutes long.
Nice.
I do like that one a lot because it really helps me get exposure to more music.
Outside of all this music production stuff and being a teacher, what do you prefer to do when you're taking a break from all this stuff? What does Michael like to do when he's like, no music, no school, I'm out?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of just chill, hanging out with my friends. I do listen to a lot of music. I have a family. I like to hang out with my family. I like watching movies, but yeah, I mean, my day's pretty full between working a full time. I'm not a teacher. I take classes to learn. I work in a different field as a chemist.
Oh, chemist.
So I do that all day long. Yeah, that's all right. So that's a full time job still. And then, yeah, if I'm not composing or listening to music, I'm hanging out with family. I like to go away with my buddies a few times a year if I can. So I try to stay connected with childhood friends, stay connected with family. But I'm pretty laid back kind of guy. I go to the gym as much as I can. I want to try to live forever. So you got to go to the gym if you want to live forever, perhaps.
Tell me about it. Yeah, I know how that's. I just weighed in at 194 today, and I'm like, whoa, where did this come from? I just put on like 30 pounds over the last 3 months,
Wow.
4 months. I'm like,
Yeah.
where did this come from? Sitting in this chair, in the captain's chair.
Well, that's all. Like I said, my job, even on the campus, I'm mostly doing like desktop research. So I'm like sitting at a computer all day.
Yeah, I
And
gotta
then I'm
get up out of the chair and get that.
You gotta move. If you're in a job like you have or I have, you need
Yeah,
to do something.
exactly.
I'm not doing hard work like construction where you're getting a workout in as you work.
And I'm a huge foodie too, so that doesn't help too much.
Yeah.
But anyways, Michael, is there anything else you want to let our DJ Sessions fans know before we let you go?
Yeah, I mean, I got the Distance Major just came out on Bandcamp and came out on SoundCloud. Check that out. Adrenaline slips out on all platforms. You could also find it on Bandcamp and SoundCloud as well. SciTech will be out probably November, and then the stuff under my own name. I will have some remix projects coming up soon, so that's something I can't announce yet, but there's a couple of remix things that might happen, so stay tuned for that. That should help for certainly get the word out about who the hell am I. And I'm appreciative that people want to remix my music. That's even better. And then I'm trying to get some sync licenses. I might try to get into film, and because it is kind of cinematic. And even when you mention like John Carpenter and stuff like that, I love the stuff that Hans Zimmer does. And I was never a huge Nine Inch Nails fan, but some of the stuff Trent Reznor is doing now with film, that Facebook
Tron Ares soundtrack.
Yeah, the Social Network soundtrack is one of my favorite soundtracks, and it's all really just chill electronic music. But I haven't seen the new Ninja Turtle. What is that? The Ninja Turtles, the Teenage Ninja Turtle movie. But the soundtrack's done by Trent Reznor. So actually, I downloaded the soundtrack, and I'm like, "Oh, this is awesome!" But I have no idea what the movie's about. The soundtrack.
I bet you it's about teenagers that are mutants.
Well, it used to be a comic book and a cartoon.
Yeah, no, I know the comic book.
That's the Teenage Ninja Mutant Turtles. Yeah,
Teenage
so I haven't seen the movie,
Ninja Turtles.
To answer your question, though, I wouldn't mind getting into soundtracking a bit, or even just having my music synced there. But I founded Life Science Records originally when I took that music business course. I said, you know what? I would love to sign local bands, local artists, and put out their stuff. But I have no idea how to do that. And I don't want to ruin someone's potential career. So I said to myself, you know what? I'll do it to myself. I'll learn the business myself. If I screw up my music, it's my only fault. If it takes off, great. But ultimately, I would like Life Science Records to start. I don't mind doing that A&R stuff. I'll have the time. Plus, I listen to music all the time. So that's another thing in the future. I actually do want to start signing other artists.
Nice.
So that's down the road. So if people are listening and they're looking for a label, I'm more than happy. You can get my information at the Bandcamp page. My email's there and everything too.
And that Bandcamp page is boom.
There it is.
Life Science Records, the number one .bandcamp.com. Awesome. Excellent. All right, Michael. Well, thank you so much for coming on the DJ Sessions. Definitely want to follow up with you in the future, hear more of that music and what you got coming out, and possibly newer artists as well that you'll be working with, all that and more. Well, it's a pleasure having you on the show today.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks for having the show. Thanks for having this platform. It's people like you that are keeping the music world alive, man.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And, we'll definitely be here for the time to come. So keep coming back and checking us out. And like I said, we'll follow up and stay in touch with you in the future as well.
All right. Sounds good, man. Thank you.
You're welcome. On that note, don't forget to go to our website, thedjsessions.com. That's thedjsessions.com. Right there. Go to our website, find out all our socials. You can follow us there, see 700 news stories, read 700 news stories, 2,700 plus past episodes, live interviews, exclusive mixes, our new music sections being launched here. We even have a VR nightclub and a mobile app in version 2 coming out here soon. Version 1 was out, but we're revamping it to make it even better. All that and more at thedjsessions.com. If you're watching this, snap it with a QR. Somebody just snapped it with a QR code. I saw that happen. Must be one of our viewers out there. Thank you very much. That was that nice little ring that went around there and said, hey, somebody did this. Pretty awesome stuff. All that and more at thedjsessions.com. I'm your host, Darren. That's Michael, aka Textbook Maneuver for the DJ Sessions. And remember, on the DJ Sessions, the music never stops.